Welcome to Digital Learning, an initiative of Directorate of Collegiate Education, Government of Karnataka. In this session, we'll focus on the vocabulary part of the lesson My Teacher by Helen Keller, prescribed for first semester BCom, Bengaluru North University. I am Nandana NG, Assistant Professor of English, GFGC, Bagepalli. Let us have a look at the contents of the presentation. First and foremost, the learning objectives. Later, the session outcomes, the recap of previous session, teaching vocabulary. In teaching vocabulary, we will concentrate on the glossary, meaning and explanation of the difficult words in the excerpt of the autobiography, dividing the text into smaller units for better comprehension, presentation of the lesson, and later recapitulation or trying to sum up the entire session, and later in the last, the multiple choice questions with which we shall gauge our understanding of the presentation. A recap of the previous session. In the previous session, we had tried to define or we had learned the definition of an autobiography. An autobiography is the true story of a person's life written by the individual himself or herself. So if you really divide the word autobiography into three parts, auto means self, bio means life, and graph means write. The elements of an autobiography are characters, setting or physical environment, details, the small things, chronological order or timeline, the perspective or point of view, the author's purpose or the reason as to why the person has composed this particular piece, and then an overview of the lesson for a better comprehension of the text. Learning objectives. What are the learning objectives of this session or this presentation? What is it that the student can think of achieving? The first and foremost objective of this presentation is to teach vocabulary, to concentrate on the glossary and particularly the meaning of difficult words. Explanation of the difficult words is provided, and later we shall try to divide the text into smaller units for better comprehension, and presentation of the lesson to encapsulate or sum up the entire lesson in a nutshell to develop interest for reading non-fiction. The session outcomes will be as follows. The student can expect to identify the relevance of language in literature, comprehend or understand difficult words in the text. In turn, it will enhance vocabulary, word power, and strengthen linguistic skills. The text can be divided into smaller units for better clarity, and to recapitulate the entire text in a nutshell. This overall will help the student to develop their functional writing skills, improve their vocabulary, word power, and fortify or strengthen their linguistic skills. Now let us start with the glossary or explanation of the difficult words. The first word, penetrate. It means to go into or through something, especially with force or effort. For example, the metal rod has penetrated his head. The second word, prey. An animal that is hunted and killed by another for food. For example, the lion pounced on its prey. Linger. Stay in a place longer than necessary because of a reluctance to leave. For example, she lingered in the yard, enjoying the warm sunshine. Plummet. It means fall or drop straight down at high speed. For example, a climber was killed when he plummeted 300 feet down an ice gully, literally fall down. Sounding line. It means a weighted line with distances marked off at regular intervals used to measure the depth of water under a boat. Languor. It means tiredness or inactivity, especially when pleasurable. Our whole being was pervaded by a dreamy languor. The next word, groped. It means search blindly or uncertainly by feeling with the hands. For example, she groped for her spectacles. Or in the course of the text, it refers to Helen Keller when she groped for the things. Uncomprehending. Showing or having an inability to comprehend something. It means showing or having an inability to understand something. For example, there was an uncomprehending silence. It means the silence was something which was not understandable. The next word, tussle. A vigorous struggle or scuffle, typically in order to obtain or achieve something. For example, there was a tussle for the ball. Keen. It means having or showing eagerness or enthusiasm. Example, she was a keen gardener. Here, the area in front of the fireplace. For example, they were sitting around the hearth. Spout, a tube or lip projecting from a container through which liquid can be poured. For example, water gushed out from the spout. Gushed, it refers to a liquid falling out, flow out of something liquid in a rapid and plentiful stream. For example, water gushed out of the washing machine. Barriers. A circumstance or obstacle that keeps people or things apart or prevents communication or progress. For example, there was a language barrier between them. Quiver. Quiver means tremble or shake with a slight rapid motion. For example, the tree's branches stopped quivering. Crib. It means a child's bed with barred or latticed sides, literally a small cot kind of a thing. For example, he looked down at the sleeping child in the crib. Despair. It means lose or be without hope. For example, we should not despair, or it means we should not lose hope. Sorry. Persist. Continue to exist, be prolonged. For example, if the symptoms persist or continue to exist for more than a few days, then contact your doctor. Tangible, clear and definite, real. For example, the sentence can be, the emphasis is now on tangible results, or the emphasis is now on clear results. Honeysuckle, it refers to a widely distributed climbing with tubular flowers that are typically fragrant and of two colors or shades, opening in the evening for pollination by moths. And there is a reference in the lesson like Aaron's rod with flowers. This is a reference to the Bible, number 17. Aaron was the brother of Moses. His blossoming rod or staff signified that his tribe would be the priest of the Israelites. Let us try to divide the text into smaller units for better comprehension. First, the author and the historical background. When the author, Helen Keller, was 19 months old, she was struck by an illness that left her blind and deaf. So this understanding of the background or the circumstances which led to her impairment is of utmost importance. And then Helen Keller's life can be divided into pre-Anne Sullivan and post-Anne Sullivan. What I mean to say is, Helen Keller's life before the arrival of Anne Sullivan was described as dark. Helen felt she was living in a bleak world. She felt herself isolated, and the anger and bitterness kept on piling in her, and there was the plea of her soul for some sort of light to come into her life. And then her life changed dramatically on March 3rd, 1887, after the arrival of her teacher, Anne Sullivan. In fact, the day of arrival of Anne Sullivan is clearly etched in Helen's memory, as she describes in her autobiography. She says that as she was standing in the porch, she knew something unusual was about to happen. As she heard approaching footsteps, she stretched out her hand, anticipating her mother, but some stranger took her hand, and also the little girl was carried in her arms. It was only later Helen realized that the person who has carried her or hugged her in her arms was the one who was going to be her teacher and change her life forever. And then we can see post Anne Sullivan's arrival how things started changing for the better for Helen Keller. The first instance of learning a word, DOLL, her happiness, her childish pleasure and pride. Her teacher kept a doll in one of her hands, and on the other hand tried to spell out the words DOLL. Her happiness, Helen Keller's happiness, her childish pleasure when she realized that she is learning something new, and how she proudly went to her mother and tried to do the same on her hands. And later, the conflict with Anne Sullivan. It is because Anne Sullivan tried to make her learn something new, but then we can see Helen's tantrum with her repeated attempts. But then Anne Sullivan was a excellent teacher, or she was a patient teacher. In spite of her futile attempts, she did not let go. In fact, she gave it some time and then later again reiterated the same point. And then the most important incident of all, the illuminating episode of the water. That is the word water spelled as Water. The teacher, Anne Sullivan, kept one of Helen's hands under the water, and as the cool water gushed over her hands, on the other hand, Anne Sullivan spelled out the word Water. It was at that moment Helen Keller realized that the cool liquid flowing over her hand was in fact known as water. That is why she says in her autobiography, "The living word awakened my soul, gave it life, hope, joy, and set it free." And then she started looking towards a promising future. Let us try to present the entire lesson in a nutshell. To encapsulate, the present excerpt is taken from her autobiography, The Story of My Life, which was published in 1903. While 19 months old, Keller had a serious illness which left her deaf and blind. She describes her earliest memories of sights and sound. She learned sign language after her illness but felt isolated from the world around her, and her frustration while trying to learn is clearly described. She describes how she learned to read, write, and talk with the help of her teacher, Anne Sullivan. Anne Sullivan taught her pupil to spell out letters into her hand, and the primary episode wherein she managed to connect in her mind the cool, fresh sensation of running water with the word water. This was the main incident because it is from then on or henceforth Helen Keller realized that everything has a name. Let us try to recap whatever we have learned through the course of this presentation. We try to comprehend the difficult words in the text. All the difficult words in the course of the text are described in the presentation along with relevant examples. The text is also divided into smaller units for better understanding. The text can be divided into these smaller units. The first unit can be the author and the historical background, an introduction to the author and the historical background, and then Helen Keller's life before the arrival of Anne Sullivan, the day of arrival of Anne Sullivan, and post Anne Sullivan's arrival, how Helen Keller's life changed dramatically for the better. Her first instance of learning a word, her conflict with Anne Sullivan, the illuminating episode of water, and how she started looking towards a promising future, and the entire lesson in a nutshell. Let us try to test ourselves. It is time for multiple choice questions. The first question: what caused Helen to become blind and deaf? An illness, an accident, negligence, or tantrums? And the correct answer is an illness. Tangible means unclear, clear, spike, or spot. And the correct answer is option B, clear. Despair means hope, happiness, or hopeless, or shallow. And the correct answer is option C, hopeless. Before Anne Sullivan's arrival, Helen felt happy, content, locked in a dark world, or none of the above. And the answer is option C, locked in a dark world. How did Anne Sullivan teach Helen? This is very important. Unlike the conventional teaching, Anne Sullivan did not make Helen sit in a place and teach her through the course of sign language. What were the options through which Anne Sullivan taught Helen? The options provided are audio, singing, or reading. Or did she spell out the words in her hand? And the answer is option D. She spelled out the words in her hand, and as a result, Helen could clearly understand that the object that she was feeling with the other hand and what it was spelled out in the course of her other hand. And this is where Anne Sullivan stands out as an excellent teacher. The references used for this presentation: